Welcome back. Let's talk about when physical injuries get reclassified as mental disorders. Now, this is a game that disability carriers play with all sorts of medical conditions. But in this case, we're going to talk about a post-concussive syndrome. According to the Mayo Clinic, post-concussive syndrome, PCS, can result from a mild traumatic brain injury, such as a concussion. And these injuries can occur from a fall, a car accident, contact sports, or a violent shaking of the head or the body. You don't need to lose consciousness to develop PCS. The severity of the injury does not necessarily determine either the symptoms or how long those symptoms last. But what are the common symptoms that we see? Whether headache, dizziness, and problems with concentration or memory. And that can persist for months or even years. So the question becomes, is PCS a mental nervous condition or an organic physical condition? And the answer will matter. If PCS is labeled as a mental nervous condition, benefits can be limited to just 2 years. If it's classified as a physical condition, benefits can continue so long as the disabling condition persists and meets the policy definition terms of disability. And that question was at the center of a case, Hall versus Reliance Standard. So let me tell you Miss Hall's story. Miss Hall was a registered nurse who was seriously injured in a car crash. She suffered a concussion, post-concussive syndrome, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, headaches, dizziness, neck pain, numbness, and back pain. So Reliance Standard approved her claim, but invoked the mental nervous limitation after 24 months, arguing that her disability was not physical, but it was psychiatric. So how did the policy define mental or nervous disorder? And this is really key. The policy listed bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, delusional or paranoid disorders, psychotic disorders, depressive and anxiety disorders, somatoform and eating disorders, and general mental illness as being covered under this mental nervous policy limitation. But guess what? There was no mention in this definition of post-concussive syndrome. So what did Reliance Standard do? They hired a neuropsychologist who reclassified her condition as a somatic symptom disorder and chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. And this tactic is common. They're going to shift that physical diagnosis into a psychiatric one once the policy limitation applies. Now, what happened? Unfortunately, in this case, Reliance Standard's decision was upheld under the arbitrary and capricious standard of review, which requires that only the insurer's interpretation be reasonable, not necessarily correct. Hall argued that her cognitive problems stemmed from the physical brain trauma, but the court accepted Reliance Standard's reasoning and reliance on its own medical reviewer. Stinky decision. So what are the takeaways from this case? Well, number one, under ERISA, insurers and plan administrators can rely on their own consultants. They aren't required to favor the opinion of a treating physician. So in other words, there's no treating physician rule. Number two, when a policy says benefits are limited for conditions caused or contributed to by a mental disorder, this language gives the carrier wide latitude to reclassify the condition. And I call this the Monty Python mental nervous policy limitation. So obviously she had some psychological issues as a result of the injury, but if there was caused or contributed to language, if that depression or that anxiety or that post-traumatic stress disorder contributed ever so small, ever so slightly to her disability, benefits were going to be limited to just 2 years. So what should we be doing here? Well, if your disability arises from a head injury, we want to, one, make sure that your doctor clearly documents the physical source of your symptoms. Two, that they document the neurological source of your symptoms, and that can involve diagnostic testing. Number three, they want to document both the physical symptoms that you have and potentially the neurological symptoms that you have. And we want to make sure that you're giving a really good history of your symptoms and functionality. Now, I find with my TBI clients that they don't really do a good history. They're not good historians. And so oftentimes it's a family member who's keeping a log of the symptoms that they're having, the problems with memory, the problems with concentration, the problems with emotional regulation. And that is really important because ultimately we want the doctors to be able to say, look, based on the area of injury to this person's brain, these symptoms that they're having are consistent with that organic physical injury. They are not psychological in nature. They're not psychologically based. They are, in fact, organically caused. We don't want the disability carrier plan to reclassify this organic brain condition into a psychiatric condition. Now, there are some pitfalls here. Your doctor may have suggested that you have neuropsychological testing. And it's not uncommon for people who have problems as a result of a TBI to also be depressed and have anxiety. Sometimes these neuropsychological tests will kind of try to parse out what the organic cause is, the damage to the executive functioning, but they also kind of address the depression and the existence of the depression and the nature of the impact that the depression or anxiety has on a person's psychological functioning. Before that neuropsychologist goes and does any testing, I always say timeout. We want to review that policy to understand, do we have a mental nervous policy limitation? And what is it? What's covered? What's not covered? Is it a cause or contributed limitation? And we want to think about what we want that neuropsychologist to do. Often I will have a pre-testing, pre-evaluation consult with a neuropsychologist saying, look, we've got a ERISA claim here. We've got these policy terms. What testing do you think you can do that will tease out the cognitive basis of this disability and not so much concentrate on the psychological issues? But if you want to concentrate on them, you need to understand we've got this Monty Python mental nervous limitation. And so while they may be depressed, we don't really want to say that the depression is going to cause them disability or impact their disability. And of course, we want to do this in a truthful and honest fashion, but we want to try to address these problems well before this neuropsychological exam happens. And if it's after the fact, we're probably going to have a conference with a neuropsychologist to address their report and, of course, the opinions of the carrier or plan's neuropsychologist. You can hear that this is complex and it's going to take potentially a lot of planning and a lot of strategy and potentially a lot of work to reverse the opinions of unfavorable doctors or to address the opinions in a way that shows that this is and remains an organic physical condition. Got it? Let's take a break.
Are you a professional with questions about your individual disability policy? You need the Disability Insurance Claim Survival Guide for Professionals. This book gives you a comprehensive understanding of your disability policy, with tips and to-dos that will assist you in submitting a winning disability application. This is one you don't want to miss. For the next 24 hours, we're giving away free copies of the Disability Insurance Claim Survival Guide for Professionals. Order yours today at disabilityclaimsforprofessionals.com.